and very warm welcome from the EU Pavilion at COP26 in Glasgow. Very warm welcome. My name is Corinna Zierold. I'm the host. I'm going to guide the discussions of the panel tonight. It's a very important discussion that we are going to have tonight, at least for us trade unions. This event is co-organized by Industrial Global Union and Industrial European Trade Union. Our two federations are organizing 50 million workers around the globe in manufacturing sectors, in energy sectors, and in mining sectors. It's important, especially since today in the EU Pavilion, it's a day dedicated to the European Green Deal, to climate neutrality, and to just transition. And that's why we have also selected our subject, just transition, of the workforce. It's obvious that the members that we are representing, the workers, they are at the front line of the transition already today. We see the decline of sectors like the coal mining and thermal power. But there's also jobs in transition due to new technologies, due to changing business models, and other drivers of change. But at the same time, the members that we represent are also the drivers of change. Through their daily jobs, they are actually the creators of the transition. So we want to also highlight that there's also a good perspective of creating new jobs. And what we would like to discuss here is where we are with the just transition, how we can ensure at the end of this process there's good jobs, quality of life across the globe in all regions. So I'm very delighted that I see many faces at that time of the day, also here in Glasgow in the EU side event pavilion. But now I don't want to take any longer for the introduction. I would like to give the floor to our first speaker. It's our dear friend Agnes Hungarius. She is a member of the European Parliament for the Dutch Labour Party in the S&D fraction, and she's also leading for S&D on employment and social affairs, and is indeed very committed on the implementation of the European Pillar for Social Rights. Agnes, I pass over the floor to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you first of all for being able to speak to you today, because so I can still have the idea that I'm a little bit part of what's happening in Glasgow, and that's a nice feeling. So thank you for the invitation. And I thought I'm also going to start with the coal mining sector, because it was on the last day of the year 1974 that the last coal mine was put to the surface in our coal mine region in the Netherlands, in Limburg. With this last coal mining, it was also putting an end to many, many years of coal mining in the south of Limburg. Coal mines were the main place of employment in that region. Coal mining was part of their identity, and therefore it determined the daily lives of nearly everyone living in that region. And when closing down the mines, the government promised that the mines would not close down without organizing alternative employments. But nevertheless, the closing down of the mines resulted in the loss of 45,000 direct jobs and 30,000 indirect jobs. And the social economic impact of this closure of these mines although a very long time ago, is still visible in Limburg today. And for training, I'm a historian myself, so I know very well that people don't always learn the lessons from the history. But I think it would be very much central that we learn the lessons from the experience of Limburg, but I could also mention Wallonia or Wales. And I think the only way we can make the European Green Deal and the just transition a success is when we bring everyone along. We are talking about leave no one behind. Let's bring everyone along. I think this is the only way to make this transition a real success. And in the documents you are talking about in Glasgow, the term just transition is also described, I think, in a very nice way. It's described as a process towards environmentally sustainable economy, which needs to be well managed and contributes to the goals of decent work for all, to social inclusion and to eradication of poverty. So in order to have an inclusive and just transition, we need to share the burden among all of us. And I think being a social democrat, I should say, let's put the heaviest burden on the strongest shoulders. It was the ILO who said that a just transition to sustainable development can power a human-centered approach to the future of work that transforms economies and societies, that maximize opportunities for decent work for all, reduce inequalities and promote social justice, support industries, workers and communities. So it can be done. That's what the ILO is making as a statement. And although if you look at the practice at the moment, I think you still see that big corporations profit, that energy companies make obscene profits, and the super rich hoard the planet's resources. So the question is, what's left for the rest of us? So if you see what's happening and if you see what we are aiming at, I think it's crystal clear that we need a changing of policies to reduce inequality if we really mean to achieve a just transition for all. Something has to be changed because otherwise we cannot reach this goal. And just the day after tomorrow, our political family, the S&D group in the European Parliament, is presenting a report called The Great Shift from a Broken World to Sustainable Well-Being, which describes all kinds of policies which are necessary to reach this point of a just transition. I think it's possible. We believe it's possible that a sustainable well-being, including ecological health and social progress and gender equality, it can be done, but then we have to put it at the center of our policy making. It has to be at the center of the debate when we shape the future, because you cannot pretend that the fight for climate is not part of the same battle as the fight for more equal and more fair societies. And I think without accomplishing both, we are losing both. At least that's my strong feeling. It's clear that all sectors everywhere will feel the consequences of the transition, and we just need to make sure that these consequences are in order to tackle. We need to know what the consequences are in order to be able to tackle them. And I think the first message should be proper mapping. We should map what's necessary to ensure that we also put in place the correct tools. Rural areas may have different needs compared to urban areas. And I think we need a regional approach adjusted to every different sector and circumstances. I think Green Deal cannot be a one-size-fits-all. We need to have a different approach for different sector and different regions. It also requires, of course, more workers' participation and consultation if we want to get this done in a sustainable way. I think it's of the utmost importance that workers in all sectors and, of course, their unions have a say in how to change the policies they are directly affected by. So social partners need a proper place at the table. They should not just be invited to a stakeholders meeting. They should have a vote. They should have a say. And I think next to that, it's time that the top-down management, spreadsheet management, you also can call it, is over. I think the governance framework that is both sustainable and social, with sustainability and the social goals at equal footing, is necessary. And that would mean, I think, indeed, adjustments of the policies which are presently at the table. So I think that EU funds like the Recovery and Resilience Funds or the new Social Climate Funds should be aligned with mandatory social objectives in order to ensure coherence in public financing of the just transition. There should be, let's say, social conditionalities to have access to these funds. For example, a condition that there should be the creation of quality green jobs. There should be the creation of decent working conditions, or, for instance, implementation of sustainable corporate governance or due diligence. However, I think it's also clear that although there is a shitload of money, the current size of the Social Climate Fund is not enough to accomplish all its goals. So if you say leave no one behind and make a just transition, the present funding of the Social Climate Fund is not enough to deliver upon this goals. Next to that, I think it's important to say that the money should not only be used to invest in skills, but also in creation of actual jobs. Because I think one of the things I'm really hating is that there is such a dogma around skills, as if skilling is the solution for any transition problem. But the transition is not an individual problem. It's up to society, to governments, to solve the problems in the not in the individual, but on a collective level. Because the social contract as it stands cannot be stretched any further as it is. So that is important. And we have to talk about the amount of money available, but we should also have a clear debate about what do we want with this money, and putting all the money on skilling is not the appropriate answer, I should say. The Commission has launched a public consultation on social and labour aspects for the Fit for 55 package. There is a public consultation, but the Commission also foresees to propose a Council recommendation on these aspects. And although, and given that there is a sustainable government involved, I think a Council resolution in itself is not enough. I would plead for also involvement of the European Parliament. But I think it's also necessary that we have a bigger commitment than just a recommendation to ensure just transition. It should go beyond the current mantra of skills, social benefits for the poor, and affordable access to essential service and social dialogue. the debate at the table is broader and should be held in a broader sense. As S&D, we are looking and judging the Fit for 55 package as a whole to see how we can improve the social dimension in order to pursue indeed a fair and equal society. And while looking, of course, at all the different proposals individually, we are also looking for how can we strengthen the social dimension overall. And I think having input from you, from the trade unions, from our social partners, is essential to make this overall look a success. And the just transition can bring many opportunities, I'm totally convinced. But we should also fairly distribute the responsibilities and the pleasures amongst the different sized shoulders. To conclude from my side, Limburg was not, when the mines were closed, a poor region. It was a proud region. It was back in the day also a region where you can say it was a gold mine for the Dutch society. But instead of using the profits that the rest of the country enjoyed back in the days to invest in this region, I think people feel themselves abandoned, and they rightly felt so. And if I look now at the fact that we have 30 coal mine regions in Europe, and globally many, many more, I think it's important to learn the lessons, because you still can see the scars in this part of my country. I think we ought to learn from the history. It cannot repeat itself again and again and again. We cannot make the transition an individual problem, but in order to accomplish a fair and social society, we should really, truly push for a just transition. We must redesign our governance framework. We must correctly invest EU funds as well as state aid with the proper conditionalities to ensure that we create a sustainable Commonwealth and jobs at the regional level. And together, to end on a positive note, we can rise to this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agnes, for these words. I think you are speaking from our hearts as well as trade unions when you say we have to learn the lessons from the past, and we have to actually look into the anticipation of change, including the workforce, putting social conditionality to funding, having adequate funding for the transition. And having real social dialogue with workers, real social dialogue, and not superficial, beyond the mere consultation. So, Agnes, we would like to ask you to stay with us for the discussion later on. But now we will continue with our panelists. We have with us tonight a couple of panelists. I start introducing them to you. Our first panelist will be Colin Potter. Colin is a research officer at Unite the Union. We then have Christine Asante. She is a colleague from Ghana, the Industrial and Commercial Union in Ghana. We have also Karl-Petter Thorvaldsen. He's representing SSAB, a steel company in Sweden. He will join us remotely later tonight. Hello, Karl-Petter. We also have Diana Junquera from Industrial Global with us tonight. And last but not least, we have Peter van Kemzeke. He is policy assistant to the Director General of DG Klima, and he's also replacing our guest that we usually had confirmed, the head of cabinet of Mr. Timmermans. So thank you, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us tonight for this discussion. So I would start with you, Colin, and asking you about the declaration, the Just Transition Declaration that has been launched last week here in Glasgow. It's based on an initiative by the UK COP presidency. It's looking into 6 very concrete commitments by the signing governments on the creation of good local jobs, on the actually ensuring the transition of workers, a smooth transition of workers, on concrete commitments on delivering on the policy framework and enabling policy framework, on also looking into the supply chain, and also very important on accountability of governments in delivering actually and reporting on their efforts within the Paris Agreement. So I'm wondering, from your perspective in the UK and from United Union as a big union here in the UK, I'm wondering what your experience is at the moment on Just Transition, how it stands, and what you expect from the UK government in follow-up of this declaration.
Personally, I think with regard to what we expect from the UK government is a mess, to be frank. Going by their history, it's not been good because they rely heavily on business knows best, and a situation where they rely on the industries to try and sort out the problems without consulting anybody, and think that that is going to resolve the problem. And in this particular instance, I will eat my words if this actually does come off the way that the government seems to portray it. I'm sorry, it's just a case of once bitten, twice shy with this government. Yeah, I mean, we're led by a leader who imagined that it was a good idea to build a 6-runway airport in the Thames estuary. In a bird sanctuary where we have swans, to build a bridge between Scotland and Northern Ireland over an area where there's a ship full of unexploded bombs left over from the Second World War and a load of nuclear waste. This is the sort of policies that this particular government, or this particular government leader, I should say, comes up with. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that we will actually see a suddenly transformation where they start to talk to the workers, where they start to talk to the people who actually will be doing the work, for we face a huge challenge. And I don't think anybody really appreciates the size of the challenge we're facing. We've been told by the World Meteorological Organization that in the next 10 years, there's a 40% chance that we will exceed the 1.5 target, which the Paris Agreement set. Once we exceed that target, that 1.5 level, we risk the climate itself, or the planet itself, releasing huge amounts of CO2. And once we get to that stage, the climate can then run away to such an extent that we will not be able to pull back from that situation. So we're facing a situation where we're, in effect, having a government and government policies which are playing Russian roulette with a gun with all the barrels but one filled with a bullet, and just spinning it and hoping that we will not have that situation where the climate will run away. And the challenge that we have is to produce enough electricity to not just power our industries, but to transform our industries from a situation which relies on fossil fuels, that produces huge amounts of CO2 in the way we currently produce it, We rely in the UK on 38% of our energy comes from natural gas. We are phasing out coal next year, once the final coal power station comes to an end. But there's no transition put in place for those workers, nothing. Those workers will be out of work with nothing to actually fall back on. There's not been any consultation with those workers to make sure that they will have a job at the end of it, or training at the end of it. We have a government who've put forward a contracts for difference to build wind farms in the North Sea. Sounds a great plan, except that they did not employ workers in this country. They went abroad to actually get workers to actually build the wind farms and put them in place. No regard for health and safety. We have had deaths in the North Sea as a result of the situation. It's been an absolutely appalling situation, the way they've moved the whole thing forward. Frankly, it's appalling the way this government has actually acted towards its own people. And I'm ashamed in that respect, the way this government has acted. So if it's a case where this particular government has committed to just transition, well, I'd like to see them talk to us and start talking to us on a regular basis so that we can talk to them and guide them to what the members need, what the individuals need, what the people on the shop floor needs, so that it's not a case where they face that cliff edge of having no job at the end of it, that they can be moved forward so they have something to move into. So they have something to look forward to, so they know that they're going to put food on that table at the end of the day for their families. That they will know that they will actually be able to keep their homes warm. Because the way we're going at the moment, I really am not convinced that that is going to be the case. And it's, my experience here at the COP it's been so frustrating, because we have been pushing heavily with regard to the need to include the correct text with regard to just transition. And, well, this forehead has got a lot flatter from head-butting walls, trying to get the information across, to make sure human rights are actually included, and to push things through, to not have square brackets of whether around we should have gender rights in there or not. They should be there. It shouldn't be a case where they're optional. None of these human rights should be optional. We've got to make sure that people have a decent standard of living at the end of the day, when they leave work, when they actually go into a new job, if they have to, if it's a situation where we can transform the work that we're actually doing at the moment, keep those skills, keep those individuals in work, move forward so that we can transform our economy. That's what we need. Not a situation where there's words. I mean, Greta Thunberg keeps on saying blah, 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 blah. Well, effectively, we've seen a lot of that. I've seen pre-COP talks where we've had an hour's discussion over whether or not there should have been an aid memoir over what they've said over the last 3 weeks or not produced. I mean, an argument over that length of time when there's only a limited amount of time to talk about the real problems. We didn't even get round in the pre-COP talks to talking about just transition. The discussions just went on and on and on, and we ran out of time. So it's extremely frustrating. And quite frankly, I'm hoping that we're going to move forward, hoping we're going to see something that's going to transform this economy, hoping that we're going to see a situation where we can finally have workers put at the front of the economy, put at the front of the transformation, talked to, involved in the actual move. Not a situation whereby they're dictated to, that you're going to do this, you're going to do that, that's what's going to happen. We want them included. And hopefully we will actually see a transformation into an economy which we will be proud of. We will see it under Boris Johnson? Who knows?
Thank you, Colin, for sharing your very frustrating perspective and for making the points on that human rights are not optional. and anticipation of change, social dialogue, talking to trade unions and workers is important, and that the British government should have also learned already from the past transition that you had thinking about the coal mine sector in the UK. So I'd like to move over to our next panelist. This is Christine Asante, our dear friend from Ghana. She's head of gender and youth of the Industrial and Commercial Workers Union in Ghana, and she's also the acting president of the Sub-Saharan Energy Network of Industrial Global. Christine, it's nice to have you there, and I would like you to ask what is your experience in Ghana dealing with the just transition and your involvement at different levels with the government and with companies in social dialogue.
Thank you so much, and let me say I'm glad to be here. It has been a great time being with you here. So far, let me say that on just transition, we have had several levels of discussion, not only in Ghana as SAEN, but we have also had discussions around the globe with our members in the Sub-Saharan African region. So when you go to South Africa, Zambia, and all that, there have been discussion on just transition. And looking at what has transpired so far within the COPs, we are saying that we want to see more government involvement in union activities and in the talks of just transition. And we don't want to see anyone being left out. Looking at the agreement that has gone in so far, if those agreements that has been done in the past years, if we were committed to it, or if governments were committed to it, we wouldn't be sitting down here today talking about just transition and talking about the environment. So for us, what we are saying that we want to see more action than talks. For over the years, talks has gone on and etc. But when it comes to social dialogue and all that, governments are not committed to it. We have issues whereby decisions have been taken and the unions have not been involved in those decisions. We want to see more action in those decisions, and also where multinational companies come and then takeovers and all that, works are being destroyed, jobs are being destroyed and all that. We want a situation whereby when these takeovers are being done, the unions will be involved. We want to see more social dialogue, engagement with the unions. And we also want to see, I think in the declarations that has been done so far, they are looking at taking everybody along. But for us in the Global South, are we going to be part? When decisions are going to be taken, are the unions going to be consulted? Are voices going to be heard? And this is what we are looking for as unions within the sub-regions. Now that we are talking about emissions, we are talking about getting a cleaner energy and all that. Yes, we want to transform from coal, but are the unions going to be engaged in this discussion? When it comes to collective agreement issues, where are we? So for us in the Global South, this is what the kind of engagement we have been having with our government. But it has not been smooth anyway, because it is not all the government that really want to have discussions with the unions. It has been tough in some of the regions, but we are hoping that with these declarations that have gone on so far within the COPs, moving forward, we are going to see more actions. And also looking at the mitigation, era, we want to see more mitigation work being done within the Global South. And then also that the workers within the Global South are able to get, their jobs. If the jobs are going to be taken out, or if any issues are going to be done, they will be involved. The leaders will be involved in all the discussions, and not that it's going to be just a one, way discussion and all that. And also, for the declaration that have been done. We are so much interested in the declaration that has been done, especially within the South Africa region. And we are hoping to see the fruition of that discussion. It shouldn't just be a blueprint on paper, but we want to see the government own the kind of declarations that they have made. We want to see our governments owning the declaration, making sure that if the transition has to be just, then no worker will be left out. If the transition has to be greener, then they will involve all the unions from the beginning to the end of that transition. And if we want to see greener energy, like the blueprints are saying, if we want to see greener energy, the welfare of workers must also be green. And that is what we are looking forward to. So in moving forward, we are looking for more social engagement with the unions. Because over the past, these engagements have gone on without involving the unions. And we don't see it as if the tripartite must move. We want to see the involvement and the engagement of the union. Because it's only employers and then government can move, but they're not involving the union. That is not what we are looking forward to. We want to make sure that no worker is left out of this transition and no worker will be affected.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, you are asking and rightfully asking for more commitment also on the Global South, for involvement of the workers in the Global South, and also for more mitigation resources put in the mitigation in the Global South. Thank you for this contribution, and please stay on for the discussion later on. I'd like to hand over to the next panelist, which is Karl-Petter Thorvaldsen. Karl-Petter, you are a senior advisor for SSAB, but you are also a former trade union leader of LO Sweden, and Vice President of the ITUC, the International Trade Union Confederation. My question to you is actually focusing on SSAB and its investments in green steel in Sweden, and how your experience is in anticipating the change in the steel sector in Sweden together with trade unions, how this process worked, and how it's going forward.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank to all the negotiators in Glasgow. I hope really you have a strong wording on just transition in the end document. So thank you for all the work you're putting in to have a good final agreement next week. Yeah, I've been involved in making steel out of instead of using coal, using hydrogen since 1st of March. I left the presidency of Swedish Trade Union last summer, and I'm still the deputy president of ITUC. And actually, the project to make fossil-free steel is a joint venture by 3 companies. And already from the start, 2016, it has been involved the trade unions in LKAB, SSAB, and Vattenfall. So there has been a negotiation between the company leadership and the trade unions already from the start. And actually still today at SSAB we have a meeting with the local trade unions, trade union leaders every second week to inform about the steps the company are taking to make fossil-free steel in the company. First of all, I just want to say to everybody, now we are quite advanced in transformation in the north of Sweden, and actually first, what we can see is that the new economy, the transformed economy, is actually producing more jobs than the old one. So actually, we're now creating thousands, even 10,000s of new industrial jobs in the north of Sweden. So we have an industrial boom because of transition to fossil-free technology. It's both battery and, of course, steel making. And is it possible? Yes, it is. The 27th of April this year, we changed from reducing iron pellets with hydrogen, and we produced so far 200 tons of fossil-free steel. And just a month ago, Volvo presented the first fossil-free truck. So it's possible, and we think also it could be done without much extra cost for the steel. So this is actually a transition that we'll be able to do in most of the steel sector worldwide. And obviously, we also need to transform a lot of workers, especially workers in cooking plant and blast furnace, since we are closing down all the cooking plants and also the blast furnace of SSAB. And that's, I would say, more than 1,000 people working in those areas of the factories. We need to reskill a lot of workers to fulfill the new technology. But the job is not that different that you could imagine from the start. So it's quite similar. And actually this morning, this is a historic day in Sweden. The Swedish trade union movement, LO, and the Swedish employer, they made a new agreement, a collective agreement on putting more money into transition of people. So actually invest heavily that could give the possibility to a worker in Sweden to have up to 2-year education midlife with salary, so you can go from one job to another job. So that was a historic milestone this morning between the employer and trade unions. And as we have board representation also in Sweden, the trade unions, I would say, as you said in the start, now the trade union are pushing more to the transformation than the companies. So that is a little bit opposite in Sweden right now. And actually jobs in new transformed industries feel more secure than in old industries. So trade unions in Sweden are now pushing. But I must also say, thanks to Industry All, I was involved in a range of meetings with trade union friends from East and Central Europe last winter. And actually we had many trade unions that was not even called to a talk about the Just Transition Fund and how to use the European Just Transition Fund. I was really mad. And Agnes, if you're listening, I think you should make that by law, saying to companies and countries, if you don't call the trade unions to negotiation about Just Transition, don't pay out any resources from Just Transition Fund. Because it is not money that should be for companies, it should be for people and the transformation itself. So I think you should have a requirement for all the funds that you must involve the trade unions in the transformation. So, but in conclusion, so far, I say Swedish workers are quite optimistic about the transformation of the industry, and it's creating more jobs than the old technology did. So far, so good in Sweden.
Thank you, Karl-Petter, also for outlining that actually in Sweden you have a very positive outlook on the transition, and also for putting the focus back on the process that actually we had in Industry All Europe with our colleagues in Central Eastern Europe, and indeed their involvement in the territorial just transition planning, which is needed to access the Just Transition Fund, is different. They are not necessarily involved, even though actually the regulation does involve in the governance should involve trade unions. But we know in practice it does not always happen, or it does not happen in a comprehensive way, and going beyond the surface. So now I'd like to move over to my colleague Diana Junquera-Curiel from Industry All Global Union, who I would like to ask to give a perspective from your experience negotiating with multinational companies. How do you discuss just transition issues with multinational companies, some of them also European based companies that have very good standards here in Europe, but I'm wondering how this is being transferred on a global level. Diana.
Thank you very much, Corina. Yeah, first of all, I would like to land this and to mention, just to put it in context before I talk about the companies, that in 2015, two important things happened. The first one was the ILO guidelines that were adopted, and the ILO guidelines is where they decided, or where they settled the term just transition between the governments, the employers, and the workers' representation, or the unions. The second important thing was the signature of the Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement is what brings us here today. In this Paris Agreement, it was decided how to link the climate action, sustainable development, and this just transition. Now, here we are, 6 years later. And what happened during these 6 years? Okay, nothing so far. So what we are trying to do is to negotiate right now the way to implement properly this Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement, what is supposed that it's going to link as well the social dialogue and the labor rights for this that we know that is indispensable for this sustainable development, and must be at the center of the policies in order to have a strong, sustainable, and inclusive growth. So now that we have mentioned this, how this is going to impact to the company, so how we are going to deal with this. Okay, the way that we negotiate with the multinational companies in Industrial Global Union is through our global framework agreements that we have. In Industrial Global, we have 50 agreements with 50 multinational companies. And as you mentioned, mostly all of them are European companies with very high level standards of rights. But what we see is that it's really difficult to talk about just transition with these companies. They don't want to put it in a paper, and they don't want to sign it with us, with the unions. And this is the main challenge that we are facing. They are open to put it on their websites, to say that, yeah, of course, they are willing to work on this just transition, but with who? Because if you do it unilaterally, this is not a just transition. This is a transition in general, but this is not a just transition. Just transition, as all the panelists have mentioned before, must require that the workers stay in the table. And if we are not in the table, there is nothing about just. So that's the key element of this. We really need our workers, our unions involved on this and all this dialogue. And what we are trying to do is try to make the companies to understand that they have to be there. It was great that Carl Peter just intervened before me, because he gave me the perfect input for my presentation. And actually, what he was saying is that this money from the different funds that now it's coming to move this energy transition and this just transition, it's impossible that this money go directly to the companies for them to use it. It's okay, they have to use it, but they have to use it for workers, and they have to use it to prepare this transition. This cannot be done only for them to use it in the way that they want. So we are facing very big challenges with these companies, and from here I would like to call them to, why are you not talking to us about this? Why is it so difficult for the companies to put in a paper that you are willing to work with us and to sign it, and to say that you want to protect your workers and you want a just transition for your workers? This is what I would like to say from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana. And now I would, after having heard those examples, I would like to hear from Peter how the European Commission is tackling the employment dimension of the European Green Deal, and also, in response to the speakers, how will you ensure that trade unions, workers are having a seat at the table, are involved in the anticipation of change? So what is the European Commission planning to do beyond the initiatives that we have already seen in the context of the European Green Deal?
Yeah. Thank you very much, and good evening. I'm the last speaker between all of you, and hopefully a relaxed evening or your dinner, so I will try to be short. But on the other hand, there have been so many interesting interventions that I would like to react to a couple of them. But first of all, let me excuse Diederik Samson, the head of cabinet of Executive Vice President Timmermans. These are the last days of the negotiations, so agendas become a bit more unpredictable, but I'm very happy that he asked me to replace him, because this is a topic that is very close, not only very close to my heart, but I would say this is also a topic that is really going to the core of our recent climate policies. There was a reference to Fit for 55. I've been working on European climate policy for the last 10 years. The evolution as far as the just transition topic or the social dimension is concerned is huge. I mean, there is much more attention for this topic than when I started working on this thing, and it's rightly so. I think I would even say this is really the essence of the Fit for 55 proposals that we put on the table in the summer. It's a core element of that. I think several speakers, they referred to transformation or revolution, and I think we all have the feeling that we are really in the midst of a revolution. You can call it the fourth industrial revolution, the third industrial revolution. It is a green revolution, but it is a revolution. And to some extent, I fully understand frustration about certain aspects of this. On the other hand, what the Member of Parliament was saying, the word opportunities, it is also there. This is a period with huge opportunities. Every revolution is also a period of revolutions. I think if we really manage to move towards that low carbon economy, climate neutral economy, we will have cleaner energy. That's for sure. We will have more renewables. I was very happy with the example given from Sweden, where they say actually we have more jobs. Jobs that have to be decent. Decent jobs is crucial, I think. High quality jobs. Every €1,000,000 that you invest in the fossil fuel industry creates 2.5 jobs. Every €1,000,000 that you create in the green economy and the renewables economy creates 7.5 jobs. So there is that potential to create better jobs, more decent jobs. Air quality will go up if we manage to go where we want to go with our Fit for 55 proposals. So you have a lot of advantages. And let's be honest, if we don't seize those opportunities, who will be the people who suffer most? The most vulnerable people, because climate change has a bigger impact on people who are more vulnerable. The people who suffer most from bad air quality are the people who live in houses that are not very well insulated, that live in parts of the city that are not well protected. I'm from Belgium. We saw it during the floods in the summer, unfortunately. Those people who live in poorer parts of the city, they were the first and the main victims. So we have to seize those opportunities, and that's why I also say this, the social dimension is there to say. But this is a longer term perspective. And I think we also have to be very honest. The transition will come with challenges. I don't believe those who say we will be in a paradise anytime soon. The transition will come with challenges that risk aggravating the existing inequalities that we have. And that is also important to keep in mind. And that's why I think that social dimension is now becoming ever more important. So that's why it's also very much reflected in our Fit for 55 proposals. And what I really take away from this discussion is the word solidarity. And I think I heard 5 different dimensions of solidarity in the different interventions. First, dimension of solidarity is related to vulnerable households. I think what you said, Colin, was very right. Workers are also families, and they are also households. And we have to find a way to protect, during this transition, the most vulnerable households. The Member of Parliament referred to one instrument that we have, the Climate Social Fund, 72 billion euros, with co-financing from governments. So it will double, it will be 144.4 billion euros that will be available to help vulnerable households. This will be generated, and that's why I mentioned, these revenues will be generated from the extension of our emission trade system. We will extend our emission trade system to two sectors, the building sector on the one hand, and the transport sector on the other hand. The reason why I give this example is that it shows that our green policies go hand in hand with our social policies. Because on the one hand, we put, by applying the market mechanism, carbon pricing to those two sectors that are incredibly difficult to decarbonize, we put a turbo on them and we make sure that we green those two sectors. But by doing that, at the same time, we also generate revenues that we can basically spend on helping those households in those sectors. And I took very good notice of the intervention of the Member of Parliament, where she said, yeah, it's not enough and so on. We have other instruments as well, other funds as well. But it is important that you create green policies that create the necessary revenues that you can also use to tackle those most negative impacts on vulnerable consumers. So that's the first example I would like to give. Let's also look at the environment of the workers. Let's look at their families and households. The funds, it's an important part, but let's not forget our policies either. We have very strong policies on energy efficiency, energy performance of buildings. We will come with a new proposal by the end of the year on the energy performance of buildings. Let's also use this for the social housing sector. In my city, we invest quite heavily with European funding on projects that reduce the energy consumption in social housing. This is a win-win situation. I mean, you have less emissions, less energy use, but you also reduce the energy bills of those most vulnerable families. So this is a package that we have. Second element, solidarity with households, but also solidarity with regions, and it has been mentioned several times, solidarity with regions in transition. I think the figure of 32 coal mines, coal regions was mentioned. I think this is a very good example where we have to focus our efforts on. We have the Just Transition mechanism, which will mobilize 55 billion euros with different pillars, too technical for this hour of the day, I think. But there will be funding available to help these regions. And I'm also a historian, so I listened with even more interest to the intervention of the Member of Parliament, because indeed we have to learn the lessons from the past. If she gave the example of Limburg, she's talking about Dutch Limburg. I'm from the Flemish part of Limburg. We have exactly the same experience. And this is experience of transition that we can use, and we shouldn't make the same mistakes as we might have made in the past. So that's why the Just Transition mechanism is an important part. Third element of solidarity, solidarity shouldn't stop at the European borders. Quite the opposite. I think it's very important that we move, and I was very pleased with the intervention from the colleague from Ghana. We work very closely with Africa. Yesterday we made another pledge of 1 million, 1 million wouldn't be enough, 100 million euros to help adaptation in Africa. A good example is South Africa. We're working very closely with South Africa to have that just transition also there. It's we have a lot of coal workers, coal regions. We can share some lessons from our experiences here, but in the end, there is no one-fit solution for everything. So we will need to see what is the local impact of that. We also have to make sure the good example of Sweden, and then I'm going to conclude. The good example of Sweden is one where the steel workers, the steel plants, are decarbonizing fast. We have to make sure that those companies are not undermined by steel that is produced, or other products that is produced in other parts of the world with less environmentally high standards. That's why we have our carbon border adjustment mechanism. One of our proposals to make sure that we don't create, because of our green policies, a competitive disadvantage. So I could go on and on these topics, but please remember the word solidarity, which is embedded in all our policies. And of course, when it comes to inclusion, this is key. Dialogue, inclusion is key. When we prepare our proposals, you have public consultations, you have input. I'm here to listen also. I took very good note of what was said. But also when we want to implement our policies, it's not the European Commission that is going to implement it on the ground. We need the local communities, we need the workers, we need the trade unions who will turn this agenda into reality. So that's why I think that this meeting is extremely useful, and thanks for having me here at the last moment.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for also mentioning again and emphasizing we need the trade unions. We're really, we are looking towards our governments. We are looking at national level. Our members are looking towards governments to being actively involved in this process. And with that having said, I think we exceeded already the time of this panel, and unfortunately we won't be able to take any questions from Slido, but I'm sure, I think in the next days, in the coming days, we will continue our fruitful discussions on this important issue. I thank all the panelists and Agnes for their introductions and for their time and very interesting insights in their experiences today. And with that, I also thank the organizers here and the audience across the globe in Europe. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Bye-bye.